Yes, 3 seconds. And it's ready. We're ready to go.
Excellent. Okay, great. Cool. And so, like I said, if you ever have any questions like during the process or the chat, we can pause and answer those and then get back to it, and then I can just edit those things out after the fact.
Sure, sure.
Cool. Okay. Hi, Maria.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me.
And thank you for having me.
Maria, you are dialing into this podcast from Surrey, England, correct?
Absolutely.
But I know that's not sorry, but I know that's not your original hometown. You are in fact from the island of Trinidad.
Yes, I am. Yes.
So I was just wondering if you could tell us how you came to be in England.
So it was roughly around 2000 that I decided I wanted to do my MA in publishing. And so I had applied to a couple universities, off the top of my head, Oxford Brookes and Edinburgh University. And I was given a place. But then I thought to myself, am I just going to leave Trinidad for the first time, go to university, having never been on my own? So at that point, one of my colleagues, at the time I worked in a contemporary art gallery, and the curator was an English a young lady. And so she said to me, well, you can stay with my family. And I thought it was just one of those things you just say off the cuff. But eventually her mom came to Trinidad and she introduced me, and her mom said, yes, yes, you must come, you must come. So I was like, okay. And eventually, at that time, I was still in my 20s. And I was within that remit for what they call the working holiday visa. So her mom kindly was my sponsor, and I came up on a working holiday visa. And I thought I'd work for a year and then start university. And then a year in, I realized that I hadn't even had half of the money I needed. Because you know, when you're far away, you think, oh, I just need to work hard and save everything, and I'll have enough money. Year in, and no such luck. So I deferred my places and I returned home for a few months, pretty much just to sort of like see where things were at, because I was trained as a library technician. And I thought, let me just return, have a word with like some of my old teachers and mentors to see where things were at. But at the time I returned home, everyone I had done the course with had either been granted scholarships by the government to go to Canada or America or wherever else, while I was in the UK. So there were no more opportunities for me. And then I thought, okay, so I'm going to have to come back to the UK, give another crack at it. But it became clear that I wouldn't be able to fund myself to do a master's. So I decided to do an administration. It's called a administration of business executive. So basically, it was sort of like a diploma in business administration. So I did that for about, I think I did about two years or so. But it meant that I had to change from the working holiday visa to a student visa. And while I was at college, I was introduced to this young man who basically took my heart away. And so we started dating, and he popped the question. So we dated for about 3 years or so before, he asked me to marry him. And so here I am. Never did my master's, never returned to Trinidad, and I'm still in the UK. And we now have, well, obviously, we're married and we have kids now.
Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, you must have been quite taken with the UK to go to work, come back to Trinidad, and then still want to go back to kind of pursue a life there.
Absolutely. I think for me, it seems a strange thing to say, but coming here, the moment I landed, I felt at home. And I know it's a strange thing to say as somebody black coming from the Caribbean, but because as I said, my education has always been mainly in literature because I did my degree in English. But saying English is really that you're studying literature, different types of literatures. And after that, well, prior to doing my degree, sorry, training as a library technician. So everything I'd done academically really prepared me to be more prepared to be here, than home, so to speak, because all I ever read was like English novels and so forth. So coming here meant that I was actually seeing a world that I'd read about for so long. I've always wanted to travel and see places that I'd read. So I felt immediately comfortable. And I didn't move to London straight away. So my friend's family, they lived in Cambridge. So I worked as a library technician in the department of the Faculty of Classics. So not the main university library, but one of the department libraries. And I was a library assistant there. So I really sort of like went into that life that I'd read about, being in Cambridge, punting, bike. Well, not that I could ride a bike anyway, but you know what I mean. That sort of scenario. Before I moved to London, which was a totally different experience, moving from having champagne receptions at King's and Christmas dinners and so forth, then moving to London, in the East End of London, it was a totally different experience. So at the point when I returned home, I was already living in London as in a house share. And I just felt, I think once you've left home for a certain period of time, when you return, nothing is ever the same. Nothing is ever the same when you return home. So coming back here actually seemed more comfortable. It was because I'd already been here for about a year and a half in the UK and very well immersed into everything. So yeah, I was happy.
That's wonderful. There must have been things that you missed about Trinidad there and your life back home.
Well, obviously the weather, the food, and the support of family, because it wasn't a case where, as I said, when I came and I stayed with friends of family of a friend of mine, and then when I moved to London, it was so strange. It's like I was talking to a friend back home and I said, I have to move to London. I don't know where I'm going to stay. And it's like, oh, I have this friend who's a doctor and he rents a room. And when I moved to London, I moved into the house of somebody I didn't know. I was living there for about a month and I hadn't even met him yet. But there were other people from Trinidad who lived there, so I felt comfortable. I was probably well living in that house for a month before I actually met the person who actually owned, the house. So it meant that I had to grow up really quickly in terms of feeling my way around the whole sort of like the immigration system, figuring out just day-to-day life. I had to work that out on my own because in the Caribbean, we tend to stay until we get married, and especially as a young woman. So when I left Trinidad, I was 27 and I was still having like my meals made, my clothes washed and everything. So I really had to grow up really quickly, when I came here. So starting everything from scratch and finding myself and my voice and really thinking about what I wanted for the latter part of my life.
Right, and now, 19, 20 years on, you're obviously, like you said, you're married, you have a family, you're living in Surrey.
Yeah.
And it began with that move, but it also began with meeting your now husband.
Yes.
So what was that experience like in terms of dating abroad? Like how quickly did you think it was going to be a serious thing, and you thought you might be staying longer than you intended?
Dating when you're overseas, especially speaking for myself, I've always been very cautious. Prior to that, the young men I dated before were always friends. So we'd either been at university together and in the same class, or we were in the same sort of like charity youth group together. So this was the first time I was actually meeting somebody just by the way. It just happened that one of my high school friends, they worked together. And so she said, "Oh, I know somebody," and he probably at the same time was saying, "Well, I want to date, and do you know anybody?" We pretty much said the same thing to her at the same time, and so she's exchanged numbers for us, and then he and I spoke online for about a month before we actually met. So when we met, it was comfortable because we had already been speaking to each other almost every day online via what was then MSN Messenger. Um, and we probably dated for about a year and a half before we actually decided to be what you call boyfriend girlfriend. It took about a year and a half. It took then probably a few months later, I met his mom because he's from a single parent background. Um, the proposal obviously came about a year after that. But it was more from a place where I didn't expect it to happen so soon, though, I would say. Because I was sort of like preparing to just finish my diploma and, go home for a bit and just, be with my family. So that part, even though I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with this person, I didn't realize that it would have happened as soon as it did, if that makes sense.
Did you discuss with your now husband? Did you discuss whether or not you would live in the UK, whether or not you'd move back to Trinidad, or go somewhere new entirely?
After the marriage, you mean? Oh, well, it really wasn't an option, to be honest, because as I said, he comes from a single parent home, and his mom really, she wasn't at the best peak of health, so he had to be around. So going anywhere would not have been an option. And in fact, being even far away, because at the time I lived in East London, they lived in Cheam. So it wasn't even a matter of, well, let's stay in East London. I actually had to move this end of the river so that, he could be like 10 minutes away from her so that he can be available to her for, doing simple things and just checking in, really.
Sounds like a good son.
Oh, yes. Yes, he is.
So you perhaps never envisaged living in the UK as long as you did when you first moved out to work and to study, but you obviously love it. It's still there. What are some of the things that you love about living in the UK?
I like being able to be me. Um, because the things that I like and the things that I enjoy doing always when you're on an island, not you don't know everybody. Yes, it is small and people it's not but it's not that small that you literally know everybody. But still, if you are a little bit different, you stick out. You see? And sometimes that could be a bit jarring. Whereas um being here in a on a bigger island, then you're likely I felt freer. Everybody have their own experience, but for me personally, I felt freer to be myself, like what I like, do what I want to do, um, and um, not have to stick out too much, so to speak. Although there once becoming a blogger and having certain opportunities, it meant that I did actually stick out in the room. But I just took it in stride.
Fantastic. Sorry, completely lost my train of thought. No, I do really love what you're saying about wanting to be yourself, and I definitely think there is
Mm.
terms of who you are and how you interact with other people.
Yeah. Mhm.
How did becoming a mother change your relationships both to the UK and to Trinidad?
Yeah, I think to be honest, I felt my most vulnerable when I became a mother because when you're living for yourself, so to speak, you can. I pretty much knew the rules as a single woman, but as a mother, that's when things changed because obviously not having the support of family and friends, and I experienced postnatal depression, but just my simple fear of now being a mother and not knowing how things worked, it filled me with fear because you always hear these stories of, if you're a bad parent or if you do this or that, the authorities will step in and they'll want to take your child away and all that kind of stuff. And so I remember when I had my first child, it was a really bad winter that year, and it meant that back then, the health visitor was expected to come within the first 10 days, I think, of you being home. But because of that really bad weather and where we lived, we were sort of like at the bottom of a hill. So it was hard for them to get to us. And at that point, baby wasn't sleeping. I was so severely sleep deprived that I was constantly hearing white noise. And when she did come, as soon as I opened the door, I just burst out into a flood of tears. And I was trying to explain to her the things that I was feeling. And the first thing she said to me was, "Would you say you're an anxious person?" And so I said, "Yeah, well, yes, I would say so." And then she asked me a few other questions. And then she wrote it in the red book. You have a red book where you record all the vaccinations that your child has, all their measurements and things. And after she left, when I looked at the book, I realized that she put mom as an anxious mom or something like that. And that really scared me because I thought it meant that I have this book for 5 years. Wherever I go, I have to take this to the doctors. They're going to see it. And are they going to be more involved in my child's life? Are they going to take him away? All these. So it filled me with so much fear. And so it took probably, my son was close to 14 months before I was actually able to open up and say I wasn't coping. So my experience changed when I became a mom because when you have children, the government here is so much more involved in the lives of children and things like that. So yeah, that's when I started to feel fear and worry and oh my God, what's going to happen now type of thing.
And it must have been hard as well, like you say, living away from family and school friends and people that you've had longer relationships and connections with in the UK.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I do have friends here, friends that I went to university with, people that I know from high school, but they tended to stay in sort of like what would be predominantly sort of like like Caribbean, more of a migrant population. Whereas by me moving to Surrey, my closest friend would have been like an hour and a half away. And none of us could drive. I couldn't drive. They can't drive. So everything makes it even longer, you see? So there was that isolation. So it's not as though I didn't have friends, but they were too far away. And they worked in much more high profile jobs than I did. So their time was different to mine. And also, I felt I didn't want to be the friend always calling and crying on the phone, talking up, crying about the baby or whatever.
Oh gosh, that must have been really challenging.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But now your children are that much older. I know on your blog you talk about parenting and raising them in a mixed heritage household.
Yeah.
How do you bring those Trinidadian influences into their lives?
Probably more, well, in the early days, it was more to do with the food and trying to stay connected with my family back home via Skype because my family haven't actually physically met the kids. Because They just haven't been able to come over. And I never really wanted to fly with young kids. I know some parents do, but for me and where I was at that point in time when it was easier to travel with them, I was still very much trying to learn how to cope. So I just never did. So yes, it was like sort of like keeping connected to my family. And like I said, I do have friends here who like I knew from high school and university. So they are whenever they can, they're a part of our lives and visit and so forth. On a cultural level, we haven't done anything specifically Trinidadian as such because I've never been to there's Notting Hill Carnival, which is well rooted into Caribbean culture, but none of us like crowds. So they've never been to the carnival. And Trinidad Carnival is usually sort of like February, March, and it always clashes with Chinese New Year. So we probably would start the morning probably looking at a few clips of people playing mass, but then it will be on to either going into Chinatown or having a family meal at a restaurant.
So their dad is British Chinese.
So dad is Chinese Italian. So his mom, well, she's now deceased, but his mom was Chinese Mauritian, and his dad is Italian. But looks wise, he looks more. You can see more of his Chinese features. So, and he has a stronger connection to his Chinese side. So, and likewise the children. So I try to find ways that I can help them to have some experience of the Chinese culture as well.
That's great. That's so wonderful that they are growing up in such an interesting household with so many different perspectives. They're getting them from you, they're getting them from their father, from their
Yeah.
family friends.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. My husband he has unlike myself, he does have a few family members here, but again, they're far away. So we tend to see family at if it's Christmas or birthday. It's not like they're around the corner. But so therefore they have more of, if anything, I suppose they would have more of a sort of Chinese influence, if you will, because they would see their father's Chinese, family. Whereas with mine, it's more on WhatsApp and Skype and stuff like that.
Right. That's one of the, I think that's one of the interesting things about living abroad right now during this time.
Mm.
And it sounds like you are similar to me in that we're very well versed in speaking to family via Skype, via WhatsApp, FaceTime, etc. And I know I have sort of standing dates through kind of dates with friends and family via video call. And so it's interesting to see how, because of this pandemic, people are having to stay indoors and stay isolated at the moment. So the culture to kind of shift and move events and discussions and connections onto Zoom, Skype, etc.
Yes.
much greater, but in a way I feel perfectly prepared for it.
Mm.
I don't know if you feel the same.
Oh yes. So with the kids now, because we're still well in the UK, I think reception year one and year sixes they can return to school, but my children are in year two and year four, so they're still at home, and likewise their friends. So they use something called I think house party, and that is it's more it's easier for them to manage, and that's how they communicate with their friends. For myself, I tend to use WhatsApp to call my mom in Trinidad. My dad is in America, and my family is quite scattered, so my immediate family, so they're sort of I'm the only one here. Everybody else is either in Trinidad or America and Canada, so it's quite cross continental. So we've always had to sort of like stay connected via social media and things like that.
Yeah, it is amazing how you are able to reach people wherever they are in the world. Like WhatsApp groups with friends, and then some in Vietnam, some that were in Ireland, such as maybe New Zealand, some back home in the UK.
Right.
It's kind of wonderful whenever some
Absolutely.
chat is always going.
It's true. I usually say, because we have WhatsApp groups as well. I usually say, if I missed your message, I'll respond in the morning.
So in terms of well, with regards to migration, immigration, the freedom to travel and move, obviously you came over on a work visa back in the early 2000s and you stayed. What did the idea of migration and the opportunity to move mean to you?
It's expensive. Let's just start there with all the different visas and papers and things. And I've never been one to pop things in the post. I like to see somebody face to face. So I've always had to pay that much more in terms of whenever I had to change a visa, like changing the type of visa that I had. Going into Europe at the time before I was actually a British citizen, it meant having to apply for a Schengen visa. So it wasn't just the UK government, the Home Office, but also going to the embassy of the country I wanted to visit to get the Schengen visa and la di da. So yes, free rental movement, it's expensive.
Yeah, I can definitely sympathise with that. You mentioned you're now a British citizen.
Yeah.
That happened via marriage, or was that a process that you had to go through independently?
Oh, that happened after marriage. So if at the time, because policies change all the time, but at the time, it meant that because I wanted to marry here, um, and it wasn't a church wedding, it was a registry wedding. So in order to do that, I had to apply for permission to be granted to get married here. So that was one cost. And then after we were married, I had to apply for, I think, indefinite leave to remain, I think it was called. And so that was another cost. And I had that for 3 years. And then after that, I could have applied for my citizenship. So I think that's how it went. And obviously, that was another cost as well.
Yeah, there are so many hoops to jump through.
Mm. But by then I would have been in the UK for up to probably 5 to 6 years. I would already have been in the UK at that point.
Oh, so quite well grounded, well rooted.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm just trying to think. I have some questions that will end on like where people can find you and all these other things. But before we get to that point, were there any other points you wanted to discuss or mention in terms of your journey as an immigrant or a parent raising mixed heritage children?
I think for anyone embarking on or considering the expat life, it depends on where you are as a person, because the experience you have as a single person will be different to if you're making that move with children. Because obviously, if you already have children, you need to think about like schools and your where you live and the best schools to go to and so forth. But for me, it was sort of like a gradual transition. So I came single, and then I had children here and so forth. So the two experiences are different, is what I would say. You have to sort of like be prepared, be aware that you may change. There's some aspects of yourself that may change because it obviously depends on where you're coming from, what your experiences were before you actually came. For me, I've always had the mindset that wherever I am in any particular point in time, that was home. So I was able to make that transition and settle better. But if you're moving, but your heart and your mind is still back where you came from, then sometimes it's harder to settle. Because I've had friends who came after me and returned home because they never felt comfortable. But for me, if I go on a holiday and I'm in a cottage for a week, that's home. I immediately have that mindset that's home. So I think that transition was easier for me because in my mind, where I am at any given point in time is home. Home is a feeling for me, that feeling of comfort and security.
That's a very admirable skill, I think, that you can adapt and have that mindset, because obviously homesickness and feeling like fish out of water are,
Yeah,
common things when one moves abroad.
absolutely, absolutely. But I've never experienced that. I think I've always said I think I was born to be an expert. I'm restless by nature, and wherever I am, I make myself comfortable. So during my time here, during that transition, I didn't experience homesickness. People would often say, "What do you miss about home?" Or um, when was the last time you visited home? When will you go again? That type of thing. And to me, home is where the country where I was born. That is home. It will always be there. It's very much in my DNA. Um, so I just deal with things as they come and where I am physically, where I sleep at night. That's home.
That's fantastic. That does make home is wonderful, and that feels like a lovely place to end on. Maria, if anybody wanted to read your blog, learn more about your adventures, follow your family and your adventures together, where can they find you?
So my blog is called The Tiger Tales, and that is www.thetigertales.co.uk. Tales as in like story. And I gave it that name mainly because my son was born in the year of the tiger. And at the time, it was all about that surge into motherhood and all the experiences and stories I'd have to tell. On Instagram, it's Miss Expat, but MSXPAT. And it's the same on Twitter because on those two places, I like to, play around with things that interest me. So it wouldn't just be blog content, but, if I see some, nice makeup or something fashionable, whatever interests me, I tend to share that there. So you probably get a even better sense of my personality on Twitter and on Instagram.
Wonderful, and I'll make sure that all the links to those handles and the blog are mentioned in the show description.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me, Maria.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
Perfect. That was great.
Thanks.
I'm going to record like one question. You didn't have to answer it already, but my question was phrased right. So I'm just going to say, do you have any tips and do you have any advice for anyone considering making a move abroad? And that's it.
Okay.
That's great.
All right.
Wonderful. Well, so yeah, those are the questions. That's the interview. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. I look forward to hearing it.
Your episode number 4.
Okay.
I was hoping that the season would debut probably either this week or next week, but obviously everything is going on. I just want to be very sensitive and mindful
Okay.
of what's happening here in the US. So I'm going to see next week what the take the temperature of what's going on.
Of course.
And make decisions. So I would say just based on you being on tour and it being once a week, I would currently put your episode at mid-July. So once the first episode goes out, I will then know changes.
Right.
So I'll be able to let you know then, and then when it's before, I should have a link ready to iTunes and Google.
Okay. So how's your podcast? So like if I wanted to tune into one that's gone before, or maybe when you actually start, where is it?
So it's available on a variety
Okay.
Google Podcasts,
All right.
Spotify,
Okay.
Stitcher,
So,
and a handful of other ones. So I don't know if you listen to podcasts, but whatever app you use to do that, you should be able to find
okay.
it. I think the one I normally link to in my email is like iTunes/Apple Podcasts.
Okay.
But yeah, depending on your phone or your computer, how you listen,
Right.
it would be different. But yeah, Spotify, Apple, and like Google
Okay.
as well.
Under ShipShape or
Under non-native.
non-native? Okay.
But if you are on, I think I've got it linked in Twitter and Instagram. On my ShipShape profile.
Okay.
I've got names from like 10 years ago. And ShipShape is just a fashion. People still email me about things happening in Bristol, and I'm like, yeah. So I linked to it on my Twitter bio, and I think I linked to it on my Instagram as
Awesome.
well. So
Lovely.
there's a ShipShape, and the podcast is called Non-Native.
Fantastic. Lovely, Sarah. Thank you.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much. Once we're done and you've hung up, you just export the audio as you did
Yes.
previously. I suspect WeTransfer or Dropbox or similar. I think the file will be too big to send via email.
Okay.
Yeah, just make sure you export it and don't delete it, save it, and then once you've sent it, I'll confirm that I've received it.
Okay, lovely. Can I do that within today and tomorrow? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Fine.
Okay, lovely.
Yeah, I probably won't get into it until this weekend or early.
Yeah.
So that's completely fine.
Fantastic.
And whatever you did when you sent it last time seemed to work. So it's all good. And just let me know if I can help with any of that.
Awesome. Thanks. Okay. Do I stop recording now?